We should not be surprised to find the left concentrated in institutions where ideas do not have to work in order to survive. Intellectuals have on issues ranging across the spectrum from housing policies to laws governing organ transplants, sought to have decision-making discretion taken from those directly involved who have personal knowledge and a personal stake and transferred to third parties who have neither and who pay no price for being wrong.
Okay, so get this. I had this grand idea. I was going to build a deck, in my backyard, like a proper one,
Yeah.
with like the wooden planks and everything. I'd seen it on like one of those home improvement shows.
Yeah.
And, well, let's just say my DIY skills. More like DIY. Why did I even try? Turns out some ideas, they look great on paper or, on those perfect TV sets, but in the real world, total flop.
Yeah.
And that actually makes me think about what we're diving into today. It's about these places, these institutions where ideas can kind of just hang out, without ever really facing a reality check.
It's interesting you say that because this piece we're looking at today, it argues there's a certain kind of thinking that tends to dominate in these spaces, in these institutions. And it talks about how ideas that might not actually work in the real world can still thrive there.
Okay, so you said a certain kind of thinking. What does that even mean? Like, who are we talking about here? And how can an idea, not be tested in reality? What does that even look like?
Right. So the piece is very careful not to make sweeping judgments, but it does point out that left-leaning viewpoints tend to be more common in places like academia, media, government. And it suggests that this might be one of the reasons why certain ideas persist even when they might not actually be effective.
Okay, I'm still stuck on the not tested in reality thing.
Yeah, so imagine this. We're trying to create a new housing policy to address, let's say, a lack of affordable housing. Okay. But the people designing this policy, they've always had spacious homes, maybe even grew up in a different environment than those struggling to find affordable places to live. So they come up with these ideas, these policies, without truly grasping the day-to-day realities of the people they're trying to help.
So it's like they're an outsider looking in. They're making decisions, but they're not the ones who will feel the direct impact of those decisions, good or bad.
Exactly. And the piece uses some really interesting examples, like organ transplant laws. So who gets to decide how organs are allocated? It's often people with a very specific set of experiences and perspectives, right?
Right.
But those decisions have huge implications for everyone else.
That's a really interesting point. But then it makes you wonder, why these viewpoints tend to be more common in certain fields to begin with. Is this like some intentional bias or something? Well, the piece doesn't go as far as to claim intentional bias. It's probably more nuanced than that. It could be a question of what naturally draws certain people to certain professions.
Yeah.
Some people are just more inclined toward abstract thinking, theoretical frameworks, that kind of thing. They might naturally gravitate towards academia or research.
Makes sense.
And then there are the incentives within these fields, right? Like in academia, there's a lot of pressure to publish in prestigious journals, to get grants. And those things often favor a particular kind of approach.
So you could end up with a situation where the incentives actually reward a certain type of thinking, even if it doesn't always lead to the most practical or effective solutions in the real world.
So it's like the system itself might be accidentally reinforcing a particular way of looking at the world.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got these institutions where a certain kind of thinking might be more common. We've got these ideas that might not always get tested against the realities of everyday life. For the average person listening to this right now, why does all of this matter?
Well, it highlights something crucial. And that's the importance of always being critical, questioning assumptions, and seeking out diverse perspectives. Because whether we're talking about housing, healthcare, education, whatever, we need to make sure the people making the decisions are in touch with the real-world impacts of those decisions.
So being aware of this potential disconnect, this gap between theory and reality, it's not just an academic exercise.
Absolutely not. This stuff has real consequences.
It makes you really think about the long-term implications of all of this, right? Like what happens if ideas aren't tested against the realities of everyday life? That's something to ponder. All right, folks, that's our deep dive for today. As always, keep those brains buzzing and stay curious.